Let's bring into this discussion MS Now international reporter Ines de la Cuetara. She's there in Switzerland. MS Now White House reporter Jake Traylor. Axios White House reporter Mark Caputo, who just spoke with the president. And Arash Azizi, contributing writer at The Atlantic, is here at the table with me. He's also the author of What Iranians Want. Ines, I'm going to start with you, though, there in Switzerland. What do we know about this new ceasefire and what it tells us about what may come with these talks on the Iran deal?
Yeah, Antonia, I mean, the hope is that it holds and that it will allow for these technical talks to begin. I'm here in Zurich, just about an hour from where those technical talks were set to be held. We were expecting the Vice President, J.D. Vance, Steve Woodcock, Jared Kushner to travel over to Switzerland to meet with Iranian negotiators alongside mediators. And at the last minute, those talks were called off. The White House didn't really get into why, but we did speak to an Iranian senior official who told MS Now that that it's difficult to see how talks can get underway around the MOU while Israeli hostilities continue in Lebanon. The death toll overnight in Lebanon is unacceptable, and that's because we saw Israel overnight launching fresh strikes on Lebanon. At least 21 civilians in Lebanon killed, and we know that 4 IDF soldiers were also killed. The Israelis had, over the last few days pretty much been rejecting this deal, suggesting that they don't feel bound by it. We'd heard from the Israeli prime minister that essentially they were refusing to withdraw their troops from Lebanon. We heard that again this morning from the Israeli defense minister. So all eyes on Israel to see if, they stop their hostilities in Lebanon, if President Trump is able to rein them in. We do know now there is this ceasefire that we're told began at 4 p.m. local time. We understand it was negotiated by U.S. negotiators along with the Qataris. But the big question, is whether this will hold.
Ines de la Cuetara, thank you so much for your reporting there. Jake, tell us what you're hearing from your sources at the White House.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a bit confusing, at least publicly, what the White House has said on this in comparison to what we're getting out of Iran. In terms of the fact that Vice President Vance was supposed to head to Switzerland last moment, that ended up not happening. They seem to cancel that trip. That's not a great sign or indicator that these are going to be successful 60 days of peace conversations when initially Vance is now not even going there. The White House put out a statement essentially saying that a lot of this is complex logistics and it's going to take some time to figure out. We did hear from the president earlier today on Truth Social, where he said that Iran will not be getting a single cent of money from the United States. But it's worth noting the complexity here, where very much so Iran does seem to be getting obviously hundreds of billions of dollars from this memorandum of understanding that we have right now. Already, right now, as we speak, there are relief on sanctions to Iran that translates to a ton of cash flow that they didn't previously have before, as well as this investment fund of up to the tune of $300 billion that they may receive. Now, the White House continues to say on that front, that's going to come from Gulf states, not the U.S., but regardless, it will be hundreds of billions of dollars of investment into Iran. So we are seeing from the Iranian side pointing to the attacks back and forth between Israel and Hezbollah as a means to why these peace talks are not going on as they were intended to just 24 hours ago. The White House is not saying that themselves, but I'll just remind our viewers, just for some additional context, think how many times now over the past 100+ days of this war we have seen a potential hurdle that we've gotten over in terms of closer to peace talks, closer to some memorandum of understanding, being on the same page between the U.S. and Iran, and then in some way attacks involving Israel have seemed to stop and halt any progress being made. That seems to be the moment we're in right now, and the White House has not given us clarification as to when the next time we may see Vance actually head out to Switzerland to begin these conversations.
Jake Traylor, thank you. Arash, I want to get your response to what we're watching unfold here. I mean, do you think that with this fresh round of strikes last night, Benjamin Netanyahu was trying to send a message?
I think it's clear that Israel will try to disrupt this. Israel has tried to disrupt sort of any move toward normalization between Iran and the United States since the 1990s for its own interests. The 60 days period was always going to be rocky, and it is going to be rocky, right? I'm sure we'll speak throughout it a couple of
You'll
times.
You'll be back in a few days.
Yes, I mean, it's not going to be a smooth ride. But there are also a lot of reasons for it to work. And a lot of, some of these details, for example, the $300 billion fund I mean, that is incumbent on a deal being agreed in these 60 days, right? So that's not going to happen. I mean, the president says Iran's not going to get a dime. Well, it will just release some of its own money. It will be allowed to sell its oil, which is not quite the same as it's sort of getting money, right, from the U.S. So he does sort of have a point there. But it's going to be a rocky period of talks. Iran really has a decision to make. Everybody now around the world says Iran got a great deal, but yet still there are hardliners, ideologues in Iran who are opposed to this. Why are they opposed to it? Because they believe any deal with the United States, any sort of opening, will help unravel their anti-Western ideology. The question is, Iran needs to decide. Does it want to, have normal economic trade relations, become a really normal country, or does it want to harp on, being this anti-Western ideology and using this little economic relief to further do that kind of activities?
Mark, you had the opportunity to speak with the president about all of this, and I want to play a clip from your conversation.
What have you learned about not just the exercise of power, but the limits on your power as a result of the conflict?
There are no limits.
No limit.
No, I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but, there are no limits.
Beginning a conflict, you had talked about you only wanted unconditional surrender. And the MOU doesn't look like unconditional surrender.
Well, it really probably is unconditional surrender.
It is?
I think so.
So, Mark, I found those two parts of your interview to be very fascinating. And then there was another comment that the president made. You asked him about his ability to deter Israel, to keep them from doing what we basically saw happen last night. And he said, they do what I say. Tell me, what did you learn from this? What stood out to you from the conversation?
Well, beyond those clips, Trump has the capacity to declare something a victory, and he just sticks with it. So even though he was only on 2 hours of sleep when I spoke to him, he had flown across the Atlantic from Europe, he was just conveyed that he was sort of over the moon here. He was like, the stock market is up, the price of oil is down, and he didn't quite say we've got this in the bag, but he was trying to communicate that sense. And, Trump being a power positive thinking guy, he's one of those people and one of those leaders who sort of tries to create the reality by speaking it. But what was, I thought, interesting in the conversation that I had with him, I asked him specifically about Netanyahu. I said, basically, what's your relationship like with Netanyahu? And he said, we have to keep him a little bit sane. And I asked that in the context, and the quote you just gave, of what are you going to do, or how are you going to be able to restrain Israel from attacking Lebanon and essentially undoing the peace deal or the peace talks that are being held with Iran? And that's when he said, they do what I say, they respect me. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. But previously, myself and Barak Ravid, my colleague at Axios, had reported that a few weeks ago when Netanyahu launched a really big assault in Beirut in southern Lebanon, it really, really bothered the president because he thought that Netanyahu was trying to screw up the deal and prevent peace from happening. And he got him on the phone, and he really read him the riot act. So we are going to see that sort of drama play out here throughout this conflict and throughout these talks. I can't forecast where they're going to go, but I can certainly say it's going to be rocky at times.
The interesting thing, though, is that this sort of new rhetoric, this question has not just been posed to the president. The vice president has also been asked about the role that Israel and Lebanon are going to play in all of this. And in his responses, he has struck, J.D. Vance, a very different tone than past U.S. leaders have when they've spoken about Israel. Take a listen to some of his recent remarks here.
Israel has the right to defend itself, but fundamentally, the Israelis, just like everybody else, have to respect this peace process that is fundamentally good for them and good for the entire region. What the president has grown frustrated sometimes is that we seem to be right on the cusp of a major breakthrough in the agreement, and then all of a sudden, there's a major explosion that goes off in a civilian population center in Beirut, and a lot of people who have nothing to do with Hezbollah lose their lives. That's not acceptable. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world.
Mark, is J.D. Vance basically saying the U.S. is Israel's only friend left there?
I believe he actually said that, if I'm not mistaken. And yes, and while there's some hyperbole there, I've been covering politics for 30 years. I have never seen such a sea change in the American and perhaps world public opinion against Israel. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's right, but it is what it is. And what J.D. Vance is saying, while unique for a sitting vice president, is nevertheless in line with the sentiments of a lot of voters, especially base voters of both parties. And it's a crisis that Israel's political system has, that increasingly the United States public opinion is turning against it, and in many respects is turning against Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been in charge and is sort of the face of what a lot of people see as an over-aggressive Israeli response. Again, I'm not saying it's fair, I'm not saying it's right, but is perceived to be in the United States to be just too much, too far, and too often.